When the name Canada comes to mind, we think of friendliness, good manners, and hockey. However, Canada also has a dark side. Like many other countries in the world, lots of murders have taken place there. However, some of these murders were never solved. So today, we count down 4 murders from Canada that have yet to be solved. Dino Bravo. In his day-to-day life, he was known as Adolfo Bresciano, an Italian immigrant in Quebec. When the spotlight was on, however, he became Dino Bravo, a professional wrestler. Dino achieved his greatest success in the late 1980s working with the World Wrestling Federation, where he was billed as Canada's strongest man. Dino Bravo retired in 1992. Less than 1 year later, he was dead. His body was found in his home, sitting in front of a hockey game and riddled with 17 bullets. No one was ever charged with Dino Bravo's murder, and the precise circumstances regarding his death remain a mystery to this day. Rumors soon arose that Bravo was killed by the mafia due to his involvement in a cigarette smuggling ring. Although there is no official story regarding Bravo's death, wrestler and friend Rick Martel gave a detailed description of the events in an interview. After retiring from wrestling, Bravo used his family ties to Montreal mobster Vic Curtone to make some money. Bravo leveraged his fame to secure connections with people who wanted to work with a former wrestler champion. He grew more and more successful until he became responsible for a shipment worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, which was picked up by the police. His death was a mob retaliation for a deal gone bad. Lynn Harper. In 1959, 12-year-old Lynn Harper disappeared near the Canadian Air Force Base in Clinton, Ontario. 2 days later, her body was found abandoned on a nearby farm. Police immediately turned their attention to 14-year-old schoolmate Stephen Truscott, the last person seen with Lynn. Truscott was charged with the murder and tried as an adult. He was subsequently found guilty and sentenced to death, although the sentence was commuted to life imprisonment. He spent 10 years in prison before being paroled. In 2007, after a new investigation, Stephen Truscott was acquitted of all charges, receiving a big settlement and an apology from the Attorney General for the miscarriage of justice. New evidence gathered using modern technology showed that the original investigation likely got the time of death wrong. As part of Truscott's defense, his lawyers presented several persons of interest who were never seriously investigated for Lynn Harper's murder. This included a Clinton resident who was a convicted pedophile, a minister with a history of sexual assault, and an electrician working out of the Clinton base with a rape conviction. The goal here wasn't to find the killer, it was to show that the original investigators were wrong to focus all their attention on a 14-year-old when there were plenty of other viable suspects around. One former officer believes that Lynn's death was the work of an identified but unnamed serial killer. He thinks the criminal worked as a traveling salesman and was responsible for several murders throughout Ontario. However, that man, like most other suspects, is dead, which means we'll probably never find Lynn Harper's real killer. Calgary's serial killer. Since the early 1990s, a number of women, many of them prostitutes, were stabbed or beaten to death and left in shallow graves in and around Calgary. It all started with Jennifer Jans, who was found in August of 1991 off the Trans-Canada Highway. 2 more women were found in the same area over the following months. The next 2 victims were murdered in 1992 and 1993 and left in fields to the east of Calgary. If there really was only one killer, he was active between 1991 and 1993. But it seems that he disappeared afterwards. Common theories in these situations say that he died or went to prison on an unrelated charge, but it's also possible that he simply moved. Edmonton has its own possible serial killer. He has been active since 1997 and could be responsible for upward of a dozen murders. When the Royal Canadian Mounted Police launched a task force called Project CARE in 2003, he became one of their main targets. But so far, the RCMP has been unable to prove that this killer actually exists. Police now think that the prostitute killings in Edmonton from the late 1990s to the early 2000s could be tied to similar murders in the city in the late 1980s. Not only that, but they've also looked into some of the Calgary killings to find a possible connection. They are not ruling out the possibility that one person could be responsible for multiple murders in both cities. Recently, police revealed that a mechanic named Thomas Vekla, the man whom they thought responsible for at least 2 of the Edmonton murders, has been behind bars since 2006. Ayala Salik Ogar. Even decades later, the Highway of Tears remains a giant black eye for Canadian law enforcement. Ever since 1969, dozens of young women have been abducted and murdered on a stretch of Highway 16 between Prince George and Prince Rupert in British Columbia. The police's big break came in 2012 when DNA evidence linked 1974 victim Colleen McMillan with US serial killer Bobby Jack Fowler. Fowler was already in prison on a rape and assault charge. He was a transient worker who traveled frequently between the United States and Canada. Police had suspected that he was a serial killer for a while, but until that time he hadn't been charged with any murders. Soon enough, Fowler became the primary suspect in several other Highway of Tears killings. There are a few cases where it's impossible for Bobby Jack Fowler to be the culprit. At least 5 young women disappeared after he was imprisoned in 1996. 3 of them are missing, so they are still being investigated as such. One of them, Lauren Dawn Leslie, was identified as a victim of serial killer Coley Legabagoff, who is active around the city of Prince George. That only leaves one, 14-year-old Ayla Sarik Ogar. Ayla disappeared in February of 2006. And her body was found a few days later off Highway 16 near Tabor Mountain. Like many other victims on the Highway of Tears, Ayla was Aboriginal. Accusations of incompetence, racism, and cover-ups have dogged the investigation into the murdered and missing women for a long time. Activists are still lobbying for a task force to look into the cases of Ayla and 7 other Native women missing since 1990 for links that might reveal a common culprit. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, make sure to leave a like. Until tomorrow, goodbye.